Welcome to Your 1%, the chat show on voicesandviews.com. Most of us remember Chanakya from our high school history textbook. Chanakya, the great statesman who brought down the Nanda dynasty and put Chandragupta Maurya on the throne. Chanakya, or Kautilya as he is also known, wrote Arthashastra, the most authoritative text on wealth and human resource management. When we speak of Chanakya, another name comes to our mind instantly. The author of the best-selling book Corporate Chanakya, Dr. RADHAKRISHNAN Pillai, our guest in this episode. Welcome to this chat show, Your 1%, Dr. Pillai. Team BNV is so excited to have you here as our guest. And we have 100 questions to ask you.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. The reason being that the idea itself of BNV inspired me so much. It's a new idea, it's a thought, but it is a revolutionary thought. And it's about how ideas can go to the next level. And more than me, I think we all are excited about this program as well.
Thank you so much. Mr. Pillai, I will begin with the question which is uppermost on everyone's mind. Is Chanakya relevant in today's times, when science, technology and the mindset is so far removed from his era? What would you say?
In fact, this is one of the questions which is quite commonly asked in various platforms wherever I speak. They say during those days there was no technology like the mobile or the computers. Today it's a fast changing world. Sitting in India, I can speak to somebody in US almost free of cost. And how is Chanakya relevant today? So yes, in a way the world has developed. We have touched the moon. We have gone much beyond what the previous generation have achieved. But the fact remains, there are some things which is common, whether it was 5,000 years ago or even 5,000 years ahead of today. So what is that? That is the human mind. Chanakya, when he does a study, his study is not just the people or the society, but behavior of the people in connection with the society. And as you know, behavioral science begins with psychology. So what Chanakya is actually dealing with is the human mind. And if you diagnose the human mind, its emotions, we have both the positives and the negatives. So in a human being, we have positives like emotions of love, kindness, etc., etc. And the negative side also, jealousy, anger, greed, also search for power. As we go higher and higher in any particular society, the people who influence the society most are the kings, or in the modern day we can call them the politicians. The governance systems can change. As we say, across the globe it is becoming a democratic model. The monarchy model is slowly going away. And how does Chanakya, who had written a book, the Arthashastra for the monarchs or the kings, applicable in today's democratic situations? So it's not about just the leadership, but the thought of the leader. So if you have a good leader, that means his thoughts are correct. If you have a bad leader, somewhere in the leader's mind there is greed, search for power, etc., etc. So coming back to your main question, is Chanakya relevant today? So I say, as long as the human mind is the same, he will always be relevant.
What does Chanakya say about corruption in high places and in the government? What is his advice? How do we deal with this?
Corruption. Interestingly, we are talking about corruption probably in every possible sphere, be it sitting on the dining table in our houses, or be it the parliament, or be it the Supreme Court. But the fact remains that corruption has been existing for centuries across the globe, in every generation. But what happens is that when corruption reaches its peak and when the common man gets affected, that is where it becomes important to handle corruption. Every point we have to handle corruption, but the situation that most of us are in today, it's affected the common man, and corruption has become a greed to the utmost level. Even in the modern day, if you look at the Human Development Index, or if you take any of the United Nations reports, there is not a single country where there is no corruption. Yes, it can be controlled, it can go below 2%, 3%, but 0% is not possible. Because corruption and the human mind is again connected. But what's happened is that it's gone to the next level and the next level and the next level, to such an extent that the common man, he started questioning. And it's not about 10 rupees or 20 rupees anymore. It's gone to a few crores of rupees, and we say, can you put the number of zeros? We are not even able to do that. Now Chanakya actually talks about corruption and eliminating corruption, if not 100%, but to the point that a common man is not affected. One of the important sutras of the Kautilya Arthashastra talks about good governance from the standpoint of the people. It says, Praja sukhe sukham rajnyaha, praja cha hite hitam, which means in the happiness of the people lies the benefit of the king, and what is beneficial to the people is the king's benefit. Unfortunately, it's become the reverse.
Yes.
Leaders have become dealers, and it's about amassment of wealth. Chanakya never talks about saying that you should not create wealth. In fact, he is a person who wrote Artha Shastra, which means a scripture of wealth. So wealth creation is something which is very much required as an individual, as a nation, as a king. But when it becomes greed, then corruption actually happens. So corruption again is a state of mind. Now, how about eliminating corruption or reducing corruption, if you were to put it? There are quite a few measures. The first, he says, is checks and balances in any system. So today that's what is happening. Be it the legal system, the Supreme Court, they're putting their checks and balances. The CBI is doing something. The common man is doing something. The media is putting pressure. So what is happening? Everybody from every angle is trying to focus on this issue of corruption and try to control it, eliminate it, or reduce it. Chanakya used the same method in a different way. Instead of going to the masses, what he used to do, he used to put a system within the kingdom itself, within the ministers. So he says, who is the most corrupt person? Or in Hindi, if I were to put it, dhan ki suraksha kisse karni chahiye? From whom should you protect the wealth of a nation? And he says, choron se or raj purushon se. Interestingly, he says the last man who can take away wealth is a common thief on the road. At the same time, the person who can take away wealth is the Raja Purush, the ultimate politician or the Raja. So, from this point, the policing people can catch all of the thieves, the robbers. But what about those people who are sitting at the top? So, checks and balances are required. The good part about our century or our generation currently is that the awareness has got created. Today, everything is coming out in the open. And we are very lucky that using the technology, like even what we are doing with voice and views, today we can reach masses of people without boundaries. Boundaries of countries, boundaries of time. So if I want to listen to this particular interview, I don't have to really sit down on a television channel and say 9 to 5. So it can be viewed again and again. So one of the strengths about our generation and eliminating corruption is that it's gone beyond the limitations of time and space. In the same way, Chanakya says that can we eliminate the greed and the desire for too much of money and wealth in the nascent stage itself. For that, in the Arthashastra, the first book, Arthashastra contains 15 books. The first book is called Vinyadhikarikam, which means the training of a king. As you rightly pointed out about Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya was an ordinary young boy who was identified by Chanakya as a potential leader. And he trained him up. And interestingly, the training starts with understanding what are the values. So, one of the sutras of Kautilya Arthashastra says, the 4 vidyas every leader should know, or in those days a king should know, is Anvikshiki, Trayi, Varta, Dandaniti. These are 4 vidyas to be learned. What is the first one? Anvikshiki. Interestingly, I named my daughter as Anvikshiki.
Really?
It means the science of thinking, the right way of thinking. A king has to think. In the modern business world, we say the leaders have to strategize. Yes. Right. But based on what? Trayi. In Chanakya's times, Trayi were actually the 3 Vedas. Now we classify that 4 Vedas. So Vedas also represent philosophy. So philosophical thinking, and then comes Varta, which is economics. We don't teach them economics first. We teach them right thinking first. And then finally political science. So thinking, philosophy, that's the values, then economics, and then political science. So what do our leaders learn is political science or economics. They miss out on the first two. So Chanakya definitely has got a solution for corruption, but corruption has to start with value systems. The philosophy, if it is right, leaders will be right.
You have trained about over 20,000 students all over the world. Can you recall for us any unforgettable incident or where there has been a radical change in an individual or in an organization after your course?
Interestingly, I have taught in various platforms which are not just classrooms from a college standpoint or an academic or a university standpoint. I have taught in companies. I have taught scientists. I have taught businessmen, policemen for that matter. So the kind of students that I have could be anybody who is almost like 70, 75 years plus to somebody who is like 7-year-old child. And the response that we get has actually changed my life. And I can quote quite a few of them. When you talk about change, I always believe that India was a land of entrepreneurs. This whole concept of I want a job came in just a few years back, especially the Britishers coming in and saying, we want people to work under us. So the government employee mindset, then the private employment mindset. But somewhere I believe that if the human potential has to go to its best level, they should do something which they believe in they are good at. Not limit just to 9 to 5 or a 50,000 salary. So whenever I speak very much about being good entrepreneurs. I've been one like that. And when people write back to me, call me up and tell, listen, I have decided to start my business. I don't know how. And I can quote, there's a South Indian friend of ours. He says that, okay, I always had best of the jobs, even earning almost like 50 lakh rupees per year, which is like a very good salary. But then I decided to come back and become an entrepreneur. I don't know whether I will be able to get even 10,000 rupees, but let me begin. And over a period of 3 years, he himself is able to earn 1 crore rupees. Now, that's satisfaction when you say you have changed one person and it becomes a ripple effect. Another one I can give you is, I have trained policemen and when we train, even the lowest people, let's say the constables, but I talk about leadership because Chanakya spoke about leadership. I can tell you this, that we were doing a training program for the Maharashtra police and there were some 200 plus constables. It was a full day training program. And usually I have this particular habit that after I do this training program, I would go back to the senior. It could be an ACP or up to the DG level. So for me, it's not like the lecture is over. Did we transform people at the thought level? So I remember after doing this, I had gone back to the person and say to the senior, I think he was an ACP in Thana police, and I asked him, what has been your response from the people who attended? Don't appreciate me because I spoke very well. And then he said, even before you came in, I took my feedback. And then he said, you taught them to think like a leader. I said, can you explain to me at a police standpoint? He says, we senior people sit in the office, in the AC cabin, but the fact remains that when a constable is on the road and let's say an accident happens, even if the richest businessman, let's say a Tata or a Birla or an Ambani is over there, and if there is some mess which has to be sorted out, people won't listen to that rich guy. But if a policeman, an ordinary constable in that uniform comes and he says, you have to listen to me. At that point, he's a leader.
Yes.
Unfortunately, our constables have been thinking the leader is sitting in the office, so let him take a decision. But your program triggered the fact that, I am also a leader at the given circle of influence. Now that encourages you. The third example I can give you at a very, very senior level. We did this training program for a company called as Varroc. Varroc is a huge manufacturing company. It's an engineering company. They're also very closely connected with the Bajaj group. So I keep getting these invitations. So once I was called to do a program for the Varroc suppliers meet. So of course the managing director, Mr. Tarang Jain, was there. So there were 200 plus senior people from different companies. And I had to speak on just 1 hour on Chanakya's values and his leadership ideas. I spoke, and then immediately after a couple of days I get a call from those people and saying that your program was very good, very good. Okay, I mean it's always good to get appreciated. But it was very interesting. They said our managing director would like to meet you. And say, okay. I had to fly down to Aurangabad. And to be very frank, I did not know what the agenda of the meeting was. So I just went over there with an open mind. And he just told, I'm so happy. I was able to connect what Chanakya was speaking with the values of our own company. So what is it? So you told about leadership qualities. I believe in those leadership qualities. Now, can you train the whole company on these values? It's not just about 1 hour training program. And I was surprised that company has got 10,000 employees. 10,000 employees, 18 factories across India and the globe. And of course, we almost trained 3,000 employees. So if the leader decides, and he says that Chanakya and Virok values are the same, now that's a change at the topmost level. So if the constable on the road can think like Chanakya, and a businessman sitting at that level can think about Chanakya, that it can transform them, I think I'm happy.
In your book, Corporate Chanakya, you have devoted an entire chapter to corporate social responsibility, water conservation, and so on. How do you implement it in your training system?
Corporate social responsibility. It's very interesting that today it's become a buzzword. But as Indians, we've been practicing social responsibility at various levels through our lifetimes. When we go to villages, they don't understand these concepts. But they believe that they have to give dana, they have to take care of the animals, they have to take care of the neighbors around, they have to take care of nature. So somewhere I personally believe that there has to be something called as individual social responsibility much ahead of corporate social responsibility. And individual social responsibility finally leads to the corporate social responsibility if you are the leader in that particular company. Interestingly, I can tell you, let's say take an example of water conservation. Now in this particular example, the world is talking about it, but India has been not only talking about it, but they've been practicing this for thousands of years, and it is very prominently seen in the Kautilya's Arthashastra, where water is a natural resource, like any other natural resource. So he makes provisions for the kingdom to make sure that it is taking care of the water in the good times, so that in the bad times when there is no water or there is no rainfall, it is protected. If you go around India and see some of the forts that are currently existing, including the hundreds of forts that Shivaji has built in Maharashtra itself, we will see that there was a provision for tanks for conserving water. Interestingly, this particular concept comes from the Arthashastra. So for thousands of years, we have been practicing it. But the challenge is not about what Chanakya said, what do you and me do at an individual level? There are governments which are applying this at the state level. For example, in Gujarat government, they say after they started, putting in a lot of plans about water conservation, the water table itself has gone higher. So there is no scarcity over there. But today we have to think how I as a person can conserve, let's say, water. So they say if I am using a wash basin for shaving, so I really don't require the tap to be always on. So I can shave it with less water. So the thought that I need to save water even in the wash basin is equally important. I can tell you one instance which changed my life. I was in Kutch, Gujarat, and I had gone to one of our friends, Mulraj Chheda, his native place. So I went over there, and being Bombay, it's where we don't even really worry too much about water because the municipality gives us. So it was in the morning, I was supposed to go for a meeting. So I just got up, freshened up, and then I had a breakfast. And then the car was waiting for me outside. And I was just going, I finished my breakfast and I was going, and the housekeeper, he just called me back and said, "Sir, aapka kuch baki reh gaya." I was like, okay, what is it? I did not realize. Then I looked at the plate and said, okay, my breakfast I have not wasted. Then I said, look at the glass. You have left half of the glass and there is still water in it. And then it shocked me for a minute. But that person was so conscious, because for them, where they're having water scarcity, actually every glass, every drop of water mattered. So I went back and finished it off. I came back and I'm very active in my building society also. So there also we make it a point to make sure at individual level, there is no water wasted in my house, there is no water wasted in our particular building. So if I start with myself and I start with probably around my building, my society, and I think it will catch up. But what's very interesting is that until we don't see somebody who is having the problem at that grassroots level, we will not appreciate what we have got in abundance. So my suggestion to everybody is that please do travel to places where things what we take for granted actually are scarcity. So just go down India, look at the poor places, villages where it's a problem. But once you come back, you're a changed person.
That's right. The word Chanakya itself has got another connotation of somebody who is very shrewd, who is, who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Is that also the same aspect of Chanakya? I mean, that is something that everybody wants to know.
Yeah, in fact, most of the people have this particular image about Chanakya being a very shrewd person. And the name Kautilya itself means Kutaniti. A man will do anything to get his objective done. That's the general impression people have about him. But we have to go a step deeper to understand that all the theories that he spoke about, for example, Samadama Danda Bheda, or a very powerful thought, enemy's enemy is a friend. So we say, oh good, so enemy's enemy is a friend, so can I use this? But can you use this from which context? So if you're using this for your own thing, like many businessmen say, oh I have liked your Chanakya idea and in my business I apply Chanakya Niti. So what do you say? There is a competitor, there is another competitor, I buy the other competitor, this competitor comes into place. No, that's not Chanakya Niti. Because you're using it for a selfish reason. Well, Chanakya used the same theory for a national purpose. And please know, the same Chanakya who taught these ideas of how to tackle from different situations did not earn anything himself. So the famous story goes that a foreigner came into India, he saw the prosperity and finally he landed up with Chanakya and he says, you run the country, you advise the king, but you are living like a poor man. So he says, I don't run the country, Dharma runs the country. So whatever he's saying, it's very practical because at times you have to punish the people at the practical level. But the intention should not be hatred or anger. It should be for the revival of a society. So if you don't understand spirituality, you will not understand Chanakya. So my advice is that understand Chanakya first as a spiritual person, then understand his tactics. Tactics is important, but the philosophy behind the tactics is more important.